It all began with the most unremarkable of conversations. Boring family reunion in Denver? My husband had said, a hint of exhaustion in his voice as he checked the clock, already running late. The same reunion we had attended every year, until this one. No big deal, I thought. Maybe it's just a quiet affair this time. The words he spoke weren't unusual, but something in his eyes gave me pause. Don't worry about it, he reassured me, tossing his suitcase in the car. It'll be the same as always. You know how they are. He kissed me goodbye, heading off to Denver, leaving me in our quiet, familiar home. But as the hours wore on, I felt a nagging sense of something being off, a feeling I couldn't shake. The kind of feeling that bubbles up from within when you know there's more than meets the eye, but you can't quite place it. I spent my Saturday morning catching up on laundry and scrolling aimlessly through social media. That was when the world around me began to crumble. A notification pinged on my phone. It was from my husband's aunt, one I had once admired for her warmth, her down-to-earth nature. But that day, as I swiped to open her post, my heart sank. The photos were stunning, glittering, full of life. Champagne flutes clinked together in a joyful symphony of laughter, their faces beaming with love and excitement. There he was, my husband, standing proudly at the center of the shot, in a tuxedo. But there was one glaring thing missing in this picture-perfect moment: me. This wasn't a boring family reunion. This was an engagement party. For a brief moment, I didn't know how to react. My mind swirled in confusion. Why hadn't he mentioned it? Why hadn't he told me? I had been 90 miles away scrolling through my own life while he celebrated something monumental, and I wasn't invited. Was it intentional? Did he forget about me? The questions pelted my mind like rain against glass. But then something shifted. The sting of betrayal was there, sure, but it was accompanied by something new. A fire, an impulse to act. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the photo. The idea bloomed in my mind like wildfire, gaining speed. If they wanted to pretend their lives were perfect, I could play the game too, but on my terms. So I posted a single, simple photo. A snapshot of the post my husband's aunt had shared, but this time I added a comment. Nice to know my husband had the time of his life at an engagement party. Without me. The impact was instantaneous. Notifications flooded my phone like a storm. My post was shared, reshared, and suddenly, the perfect illusion of a flawless family night began to crack. They hadn't expected anyone to question the glossy image they had painted so meticulously. They thought their little family secret was safe, but nothing stays hidden forever. People began to reach out to me, friends, family, acquaintances, some with sympathy, some with outrage. But I didn't need their approval. The truth was now out there, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. No longer was I a bystander in my own life, waiting for answers. I had taken control. The hours following my post were filled with a whirlwind of emotions. My husband called, furious at the disruption, but his anger felt distant to me now. I had seen his true colors. I had been invisible in the life he had carefully constructed, and now I wasn't standing for it any longer. I took a deep breath. The fire that had sparked earlier was now an inferno. I would no longer let their lies define me. The next morning, I packed a bag, packed my dignity, and packed my dreams into a life I would build on my own. No more waiting around for the crumbs of affection. I was leaving that behind. To anyone who feels invisible, to anyone whose voice has been silenced, remember, you don't need permission to take up space. Your truth is your power. You have the right to speak it, share it, and walk away from what doesn't serve you. And when you do, you will find strength in places you never knew existed. So, go ahead. Shatter their perfect night. Show the world the strength in your silence. Sometimes the only way to restore balance is to take back control and demand the respect you deserve. It all began with the most unremarkable of conversations. Boring family reunion in Denver? My husband had said, a hint of exhaustion in his voice as he checked the clock, already running late. He had no idea how easy it was to believe him. It was the same reunion we had attended every year, until this one. No big deal, I thought. Maybe it's just a quiet affair this time. Just another round of stiff, polite conversations about old family gossip and kids' updates. The kind of thing you can nod through while pretending to enjoy the food. I smiled to myself, already imagining the quiet weekend I'd have at home. Time to catch up on laundry, read my books, maybe even catch up on the show I had been binge-watching. Don't worry about it, he reassured me, tossing his suitcase into the trunk of the car. His voice was distant, and there was something about his hurried manner that caught my attention, but I brushed it off. He was always busy, always on the move. It'll be the same as always. You know how they are. And with that, he kissed me goodbye, heading off to Denver, leaving me behind in the stillness of our home. That evening, I made myself a quiet dinner and settled in front of the TV, half watching a documentary on the Amazon rainforest while sorting through old photos on my phone. I kept glancing at the clock. It was already past 9 p.m. in Denver. By now, they must have been deep into whatever dull celebration they had planned. I pictured them sitting around a long, dusty table, pretending to be interested in each other's lives, occasionally breaking into awkward chuckles at inside jokes I would never understand. But something about the image I created in my mind felt off, like a jigsaw puzzle with one piece missing, a space where something didn't quite fit. The nagging feeling, that uneasy feeling, refused to fade. Maybe it was because he hadn't texted me once since he left. Not even a quick, "Hey, everything's fine." Just complete silence. I was used to the occasional lack of communication, but this time it felt different. It was as if there was something hidden behind the silence, something he wasn't telling me. I kept myself busy, forcing the doubt to the back of my mind, but it lingered like smoke. As the hours passed, I did what any curious modern woman would do. I turned to social media. I had always enjoyed catching up on family posts, scrolling through photos of kids growing up, weddings, vacations. But tonight, as I mindlessly tapped through my feed, something caught my eye. It was from my husband's aunt, a woman who had always seemed to possess an endless supply of warmth and kindness. She had shared a new post. My eyes widened as I saw the first image. The backdrop was pure perfection, crystal clear glass flutes clinking together, sparkling with champagne, a scattering of soft golden lights filling the room behind them. Laughter bubbled up from the edges of the photo, faces alive with joy, some turning to the camera and others lost in conversation, enjoying the moment. But there, in the middle of it all, was my husband. Standing tall, wearing a tuxedo, laughing with his family, eyes shining under the soft, warm glow of the chandeliers. He looked like the epitome of sophistication, the center of attention, radiating charm. And yet, in all of it, there was one glaring truth that I couldn't ignore. I wasn't there. Not even in the background. Not in the corner of the frame. Not in a fleeting moment of a glance. I wasn't invited. I stared at the photo in disbelief. My mind raced. This wasn't the boring family reunion he had told me about. No, this was something far more extravagant. A celebration. An engagement party, to be exact. And the part that made my stomach churn wasn't just the revelation of the event, it was the realization that I had been completely left out. As I scrolled through the rest of the pictures, I saw more of the same. Smiles, champagne, hugs. The entire family beaming with joy. They had all been celebrating something monumental, and I was miles away, completely unaware, uninvited. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. How had this happened? Why hadn't he told me? Why hadn't he mentioned this massive event, this major family milestone? He had been talking about the boring reunion like it was just another weekend with his cousins. It didn't make sense. I kept searching through the post, hoping it was all some sort of misunderstanding, some cruel joke. But the truth stared back at me clear as day. And that's when it hit me. The ache, the frustration, the feeling of being invisible. It wasn't just about the party. It wasn't even about the fact that I had been excluded. It was about the fact that he had lied to me. Lied about something that should have been important. Something I should have been a part of. My husband, my partner, had concealed this from me. And it was in that moment that I realized how deep the deception ran. How many other things had been hidden, tucked away, like secrets beneath the surface of our life together. But then something else bubbled up from deep within me. Anger, fury, a deep, primal need to fight back. To speak the truth I had been ignoring for too long. I couldn't just sit there feeling sorry for myself. I couldn't let this perfect image of their lives, their happy family, remain unchallenged. The truth needed to come out. It was time to reclaim my voice. I stood up, grabbed my phone, and stared at the post one last time. With a deep breath, I typed the comment. Nice to know my husband had the time of his life at an engagement party. Without me. I hit send, and just like that, the facade began to crumble. The notifications started coming in almost immediately. My post was shared, reshared, commented on. And with every share, the perfect little world they had so carefully built was cracked. The illusion of a flawless family shattered. It wasn't just me anymore. I had shown the world what had been hidden behind the curtains. And suddenly, everything felt lighter. The weight I hadn't realized I was carrying began to lift. My phone rang. It was him, my husband. His voice was sharp, defensive, furious. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted through the phone. "Why would you post that?" But the more he yelled, the more distant his voice seemed. It wasn't the anger that surprised me. It was the hollow feeling that had started to form in my chest. I had already seen his true colors. The perfect, polished version of our life was no longer enough to fool me. I knew what had been happening, what had been hidden in the shadows, and I wouldn't stand for it anymore. I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. The truth had already been spoken. I could feel the shift within myself, like something had snapped into place. The silence between us was deafening, and for the first time in years, I felt free. What I had learned in that moment was simple. Silence is a choice. But so is speaking up. And sometimes it's the only way to restore balance. To stop living in the shadows of someone else's life. I wasn't going to hide anymore, to be a bystander to the lies. I was going to take control of my story, reclaim my power. The life I had built for myself was about to change, and no one could stop me. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their perfect smiles or their glassy images of happiness. What I needed was respect, honesty, and the freedom to be who I truly was. And if that meant shattering the perfect illusion they had created, so be it. It was time to stand tall, to take my place in the world. It was my story, and I would write it from now on. The hours following my post were a blur of notifications and heated messages. My phone was practically vibrating with every incoming comment and share. At first, it felt like the entire world was watching, like the truth had somehow ripped through the walls of my home and exposed everything to the light. But as the waves of attention continued to pour in, I realized that this wasn't about the validation from strangers or even the likes and shares. It was about something far more profound, the reclaiming of my dignity. My heart was still pounding in my chest as I sat back, staring at the screen. A flood of emotions washed over me, relief, anger, and a strange, unsettling peace. It was the kind of peace that comes with truth, with no more lies hanging in the air, twisting everything around. For so long, I had played my part in their world, pretending everything was fine, pretending I belonged in the life we had built. But no more, the calls kept coming. First from my sister-in-law, who sounded more concerned than angry. "What did you do, girl?" she asked, her voice tight with a mix of disbelief and worry. She told me that the family was in shock, that everyone was questioning the post. "You know they're going to make this a big deal," she warned. I wasn't surprised. Of course, they were going to make it a big deal. Because that's what they always did, didn't they? The family was more interested in maintaining a perfect image than dealing with reality. That's why I had stayed silent for so long. To them, appearances were everything. Status, wealth, the perfect family portrait. But what I had posted wasn't just a simple comment. It was a crack in the foundation of their whole act. But there was something more profound than the drama that was unfolding. As I sat there scrolling through the influx of responses to my post, I felt something shift inside of me. This wasn't just about my husband's betrayal or the fact that I had been excluded. It was about the fact that I had finally found my voice. A voice that had been dormant for so long, hidden behind obligations and expectations, but now it was loud and unapologetic. In the midst of the chaos, my husband called again. This time his tone was colder, more calculated. "You think this is going to make you feel better?" he asked, his words clipped as if they had been rehearsed. "You've just embarrassed yourself and everyone else. Why would you do that?" I could feel my pulse quicken at his words, but I refused to let them pierce through me. I wasn't the one who had embarrassed anyone. He was, they all were. I wasn't the one who had lied, who had hidden the truth. No, I was the one who had stood up and said enough was enough. That was something they couldn't understand. "You left me out," I said, my voice steady now, no trace of hesitation. "You lied, and you think I'm just supposed to accept that? To smile and pretend like everything is fine?" There was a silence on the other end of the line. The kind of silence that tells you everything you need to know. He had no answers for me. There was nothing he could say. The truth had already been laid bare, and he couldn't erase it. It wasn't just about the engagement party anymore. It wasn't about the tuxedo or the champagne flutes or the smiles plastered across their faces. It was about the years of small compromises, the moments where I had let his actions slide, excused his silence, and ignored my own gut feelings because I didn't want to rock the boat. It was about all the times I had allowed myself to fade into the background, to be a secondary character in my own life. And now that era was over. I hung up the phone and stared at the images again. This time I wasn't filled with anger, I was filled with resolve. It was like something had clicked inside of me, a switch that had been flipped and couldn't be undone. The people I had tried to please, the family I had worked so hard to be a part of, they were not my people. They were not my tribe. They were the people who had never seen me, never valued me. They were the people who had chosen a perfect illusion over the messy, complicated truth of who I was. And as the days passed, the storm that had begun to brew around my post only intensified. My phone became a lifeline to the outside world. People reached out to me, friends, coworkers, acquaintances, offering their support, their understanding, and their admiration. Some even admitted that they too had seen the cracks in their own relationships, but hadn't found the courage to speak up. It was like they were all waiting for someone to make the first move, to say that enough was enough. And I had done that for them. But then, amidst all the support, came the messages from my husband's family. At first, it was just a few people reaching out to express their disappointment, as though my actions had somehow violated an unspoken rule. Then came the phone calls, long, drawn-out conversations filled with feigned sympathy and judgment. "Why did you have to make it public?" they would ask, their voices laced with hurt and confusion. "We didn't mean to hurt you." But the words never rang true. They didn't care about me. They cared about their image. They cared about keeping up appearances. The most shocking call came from my mother-in-law. Her voice was tight, and I could hear the strain in her words as she tried to piece together a semblance of a rational explanation for what had happened. "You have to understand, honey," she began, trying to soothe me with her words. "It was just a small party, nothing to make a fuss about. It wasn't a big deal. They didn't mean to hurt you, but I knew better. This wasn't just a small party. It wasn't just a minor mistake. This was a deliberate choice, a decision to exclude me from something important, a choice that spoke volumes about how they viewed me. I wasn't part of their world, and I would never be." "You don't get it," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This wasn't about the party. It's about everything. The lies, the silence, the pretending. I don't want to be a part of that anymore." There was a pause on the other end. Then my mother-in-law let out a heavy sigh. "You're making a big mistake, honey," she said, her tone tinged with regret. "This isn't how families work," I didn't respond. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. The truth had already been spoken, and no amount of words could change it. As I looked around my house, I felt a profound shift. The familiar walls, the same furniture, the same place I had once called home, all of it now felt different. The life I had once shared with him, with his family, suddenly felt like a distant memory, a past I had outgrown. I wasn't the same person anymore. I had made my choice, and I had chosen myself. In the days that followed, I found the courage to do what I had been too afraid to do for years. I packed my things. Slowly, methodically, I filled a suitcase with what I needed: clothes, essentials, a few keepsakes from our time together. It wasn't a dramatic departure. It wasn't a whirlwind of emotions or a grand gesture. It was quiet. But it was final. The family that had once made me feel like an outsider was no longer my responsibility. The man who had once promised to be my partner had made his choice, and it was clear he didn't choose me. So I chose myself. And as I closed the door behind me, I knew there was no going back. It was time for me to live my life, on my terms, with no more apologies.